I'm Luke Kelly, and I'm the founder of the Line and Length movement, dedicated to ripping the covers off mental health stigma. After a rough spell with my mental health, I contacted a large number of mates to come together to play a game of cricket with a very unique point of difference. In between innings, a supportive platform was provided where those who felt comfortable showing some vulnerability openly spoke about their personal mental health journey. Thus, the Line and Length movement was born. While we are not mental health experts on this podcast, we are always here to support. So if you or anyone you know is feeling a bit flat, please have a talk to the experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. Today's episode is sponsored by Picker Financial Solutions. The support that Justin Picker is providing will go a long way in assisting the Line and Length movement in ripping the covers off mental health. While we here at Line and Length focus on mental health, Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial health. And now, on to this week's episode of This Is Your Line and Length.
All right, team. Welcome to the latest episode of This Is Your Line and Length. I'm your host, Aiden, joined here by Kels and today's guest, Hugh. Kels, how are you today, mate?
Yeah, I'm going really well, mate. It's great to have Hughie on, our first international guest.
It's very true. Hugh, how are you going, mate?
Yeah, pretty good. Can't complain. I'm up in one of my girlfriend's parents' place, and they've got a farm in the countryside, so it's a beautiful day out there. Can't complain too much.
Yeah, you're out in England at the moment, aren't you?
Yes. England, been living in London for the last 6 years, almost, or just over 6 years. Yeah, so it's been a bit of a change. Been lots of stuff going on. So but I'm happy to chat to you guys. Happy to have a story, see what's going on.
Excellent.
Mate, we're keen for an insight. We are keen for an insight as to what it's like over there.
Now, Hugh, you've been working over there as a paramedic, right? I guess before we get into any of the COVID stuff, what's it like being a paramedic on your mental health, just outside of a pandemic?
It's an interesting job, to be fair. It's like one of those jobs that sort of changes every day. You're sort of doing shift work, which is difficult to sort of manage your, like, having a schedule or a routine or anything like that. And then on top of that, obviously you go to sort of some weird and wonderful sort of stuff that sort of can be a bit sort of off-putting by some people, but for sort of other weird people like myself, it's sort of quite an enjoyable job where you get to have a little bit of an insight into other people's way of life. And sometimes it's very, very different to our own, but it's sort of having an understanding of how other people work and how other people sort of live their lives sort of gives you an appreciation of your own in some senses. So yeah, it's a good job. In terms of how it impacts my own mental health, I definitely had a long sort of struggles. I think it's what's called like an emotional sort of like availability. So like, you're going into these situations sometimes at work where you have to sort of either console someone or you have to break some news or anything like that, and having to use a lot of your emotional energies in that sort of senses can be really, really, really tiring. And you get home from a day of that, or a couple of like days of doing that in a row, and you can be just absolutely shattered and sort of not available to the people that you live with, or people like friends or family and all that sort of stuff in that sort of same senses. So it took me a good year or couple of years to sort of figure out how to balance that properly and make sure that I'm giving my emotional energies to the right people at the right times and not having to sort of use too much of that in a work sense. So I'm able to sort of make sure that the people that I love and care about get enough of that as well. So it's a difficult job, but I wouldn't change it too much.
You said you mentioned emotional energy there. Huey, you said emotional energy there. Is that something that you identified straight away? That your emotional energy was drained, or did it take you a while to realize what's going on?
Oh, it took me a long time. Yeah, definitely a long time. I think it took like at least a year or 2 years or so just to figure it out and sort of work out why. Like I mean, with the work I do, it's you know, you can go weeks and weeks, even months without doing anything that's sort of any real sort of substance to it, and so you don't really know that, like you don't have that emotional energy being drained at that point. But there's obviously then there's for whatever reason there's a day where it's just absolutely hectic, or a week where it's just absolutely crazy, and you're sort of going home with that sort of drain that you've had, and being able to sort of identify that time, oh, that's where I've been sort of maybe a bit short with people at home, or sort of not going out to, like, saying or cancelling last minute to sort of social plans and that sort of stuff, just because of like, this is draining and I just need a bit of me time, and sort of figuring out. So yeah, it did take a while to figure out that I needed a bit more time to sort of recharge, or to even like what do you say, like just to make sure that the energy that I'm giving at work isn't everything that I've got. So just make sure that I can have a little bit reserved for me.
Yeah. Mate, you said that you had to sort of learn how to do it yourself. You didn't get any sort of education or training around how to kind of, I guess, strengthen your mental resolve, or make sure that you're mentally okay when you're not at the job.
No, yeah. I mean, it's a bit of one of those ones. I think probably different services do it differently, but here in with the ambulance I work for, there's a huge amount of, like, I guess, mental health training as per se. There's a lot of like colleagues and people that you can sort of talk to and chat to, and there's a lot of resources available. But in terms of sort of, you know, mental health training or mandatory sort of stuff that you can tap into is very limited. So it was, I guess, a fair bit of learning on the job and just sort of figuring it out as you went, feeling a way through it. So it was I mean, I know that they're changing a lot of the ways that they're working here, because of, I guess, people are becoming a little bit more in tune with how to cope with their mental health and how to sort of strategies to come up with. So it is becoming better. But for me, for when I sort of first started my job a couple of 5-6 years ago now, it definitely was sort of just a trial and error, feel your way around. Yeah.
Huey, is there a high burnout rate? I mean, because everything you've just described there for a paramedic, like, that sounds so emotionally draining consistently. I assume that day on, it's just emotionally draining. Do people burn out? Like, what's the career span? Because I genuinely have no idea. It intrigues me.
Yeah, there's definitely a high burnout rate. I think I don't know where the numbers come from, but I've heard, like, quite a few times over my career, is that 5 years is generally the average length of a career in paramedics. So I assume that's not a very high sort of number for many careers. Most people sort of, 10, 20, 30 years for a single career, whereas 5 years seems to be the number that people seem to average at. There is definitely, like, you see a lot of people that go on stress leave or have mental health leave early in their careers as well, when they've just sort of, maybe 2 or 3 years in, and they're sort of just figuring it out. And so, yeah, there's definitely a lot of, but that's one of those things where I think the services and the people that are in charge of things like that are starting to figure that sort of stuff out and realize, well, a 5 year, so, you're going to 3 years worth of university, probably 2 years of working on the job, learning you're learning your craft. For 4 years, you're really properly competent at your job.
Yeah.
And so 5 years isn't a long time to have someone for that sort of thing. So I think they're definitely changing things for the better. It's just a slow process at the moment, but yeah.
Mate, what's it been like being a paramedic during COVID?
Lots of people ask that question, and to be fair, it's not a whole bunch different. To the type of job we go to is different, and some of the things that we do are a little bit different. But with the job I did before COVID, working in London and working for such a large population, like we were going, there's never any sort of we call it green time, where we're like available, but we're not on a job, so we're just left to our own devices to do whatever we want. So usually it was you'd be, as soon as you're finished with a job, you'd hit a button on our little computer in the vehicle, and that would say to the control room, you're available for the next job. And then within a minute you'd get another job, and off you go and do that sort of job. So in that sense, like, COVID made no real difference. It just, obviously the pressure on the system as a whole was a lot different. So there was calls being stacked up in the control room. They weren't able to, cope with the amount of calls. So, and you're going to generally, I guess, a different type of sickness of people, where, the COVID sickness was quite difficult for for a lot of the population to handle. So that was a bit different. But in terms of, I guess, my like sort of work pressure, or me doing the job that I do, it was no different, because he's still going to job to job to job, and you can only cope with that job as like one person at a time. Like, you can only work however fast you want to work to make sure that you do the right thing for that person at that time, without, making mistakes. So if you start to cut corners, try and like make things quicker, you're going to make mistakes. So it's always just sort of, when you're at that person, that's your sole focus for that, however long you're with that person. So yeah, it wasn't too different in that sort of sense of my day-to-day sort of COVID job.
Yeah.
And how we hear a lot of stories about how frontline workers they're stressed out, and they're having a lot of mental struggles while the sort of pandemic's been going on. Is that sort of echoed within the paramedics community? Has that increased during the pandemic, or would you say it's been about the same?
It's increased, but I think that's because of the restrictions and the personal, like, lockdown sort of things that have happened outside of work. I know there's a lot of colleagues of mine who, I guess, because of the stresses on the system as a whole, like as in the healthcare system as a whole, there were a lot of like bonuses and incentives for people to come in and work on their days off. So people that, you weren't able to go out and socialize with your friends, you weren't able to go on holiday or anything like that. So people were, thinking, well, if I can't do anything that I want to do outside of work, I may as well work all the time. And so they'll be making the most of these bonuses and incentives to come in and work. And yeah, so there was a lot of stresses and I guess sort of mental health burnout issues from colleagues in that sort of sense. And the personal side of things was what made it worse, was because if you're not able to vent your stresses or vent your anxieties or mental health sort of issues in the normal avenues that you would do outside of work, so like, the social sort of side of things, where you want to catch up with people, you want to go on holiday, or you want to do whatever you want to do, a lot of that was heavily restricted. So that, I guess, had that sort of that spiral effect of, well, I can't do what I need to do outside of work, I may as well just go work all the time, and then not being able to vent those sort of frustrations or feelings outside of work either, because you're restricted. So sort of people were just going down this spiral and then ending up having to go on stress leave or mental health leave, or becoming quite burnt out at the end of it.
Huey, what does the day-to-day restrictions sort of look like over there in England as a whole, sort of at the moment? How's it different to what it's like for us here in Australia?
It's, at the moment, it's becoming better. For the last maybe 3 months, it's been quite restricted. So you're not supposed to meet up or catch up with anyone outside of your household. So I live with just my fiance Chloe, and so it was just us two for the last 3 months. Your most non-essential shops are closed, so anything outside of like your just food and medical needs, I guess, were all closed. So like, you couldn't go clothes shopping, you couldn't go to restaurants, bars, you couldn't get your hair cut. Got very long locks of hair going at the moment. What else? So, and obviously holidays, travel, anything like that. But seeing friends and family, that was all a no. So, yeah, that the day-to-day lockdown's been restricted quite a lot. But as of I think next week, we've got some shops are opening up, so we're allowed to go get a haircut. So we're allowed to go to just general clothes shopping, or shopping in general is opened. I think bars are open for outdoor sort of use, so you can be outside and be in the pub garden or whatever it is. So that sort of things are becoming better. But yeah, it's been quite difficult because you don't really realize how much you rely on those things that you take for granted, like just being able to go to a bar and catch up with a mate and have a bit of a debrief or things like that. That's quite a lot. Like that is whilst it seems like a small thing, it's a nice thing to do. So it's definitely you don't realize how good you've got it until it's gone type of situation.
Huey, was there any temptation to come back home to Oz, or were you always going to stick it out? Like, obviously I know you're engaged to Chloe, who's British, but were you ever just thinking about, let's just pack it up and come home, do 2 weeks quarantine and go again here in Australia, or were you always set on sticking it out?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, it went through my head, yeah, but I don't think there was ever going to be a moment where I did decide to pack up and leave. Chloe and I have got some sort of some good future plans here that we want to try and enact. So I think when lockdown first started, like a year ago now, nobody really thought how long this thing would last. So it was probably only more recently that we decided that those thoughts of like, fuck it, let's just pack up and leave, do the quarantine and go, sort of came into my head.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think it was ever going to be an actual let's do it. It was more of just a fleeting thoughts, I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me,
mate.
Yeah, no, I don't think I would. Sorry, go on.
No, you go. It's your episode, mate. You're the one telling the stories.
I was just going to repeat myself and say, I don't think I was ever going to properly leave here. As much as people like to sort of try and say the negatives of England, it's got some good positives as well. So I wouldn't have gone back to Australia just at this stage. Yeah,
it's fair enough, mate. You said right at the beginning of your career, you sort of struggled with that emotional balance of sort of the work-home life. What are some strategies that you used yourself to kind of help manage that sort of balance?
I think there's a few things. So, like, I guess sometimes when you've done a whole day of just talking to other people and sort of working through their problems and trying to figure out the best solutions for them, sometimes you just want to come home and watch TV, or just the thing that I like to do sometimes is I just sort of bang on some YouTube and watch other people play video games for hours on end, and it's just a good disconnect for me, just to be able to find I don't know, it's just like something completely different that's just my thing that I like to do, and it just makes me sort of happy and gives me a bit of a break from the thoughts that go through your head when you're I've got these plans coming up, or should I have done that differently or whatever. So it sort of just completely tunes you out for however long you're listening or watching these videos for. I think the other things that I've tried to do is like educate yourself. So sort of just things like read about mental health or read about sort of coping strategies or that sort of stuff. I find being quite helpful in sort of realizing like what you're going through is a normal thing to go through, and why like the one that I think I really cottoned onto was like the emotional bucket, where it was like you have a certain amount of energy that you can give every single day, and if you pour all that bucket out at the start of the day, giving all your emotional energy to that first person you see, you're gonna leave yourself dry for the rest of the day, and that's not going to be good for your own health. So that was one of the sort of things that I like to sort of make sure that you ration yourself out appropriately. What else do I try and do that sort of helps me? I guess the simple things like limiting sort of, this was more of a pandemic thing, I guess, was limiting the amount of like news that you had that was being fired at you. So if you have the news on 24 hours a day, it just seemed like doom and gloom. It's just people dying, people like sickness and that sort of stuff. So, I'd catch the first 5 minutes, get like the normal, whatever's the most important updates, but I'd try and turn it off after that, because that can sort of, having that cycle of that going on is definitely a very difficult sort of mindset to be in when all we're hearing is these sort of negative things. What else? I think the other things I tried to do was limit social media as well. I think it's a good thing to try and do. I didn't do anything huge by like turning it off altogether, or by sort of deleting accounts or anything. But I think the simple thing I tried to do was just take the Facebook button, the Instagram button off your home screen, like where it was, and move it to like sort of a different spot on your phone, so that that normal muscle memory sometimes you have where you open your phone, you click on Facebook or you click on Instagram, whatever it is, and you start scrolling. Like if you just move that button, sometimes having that muscle memory being fooled, so it's all of a sudden in a different spot, so your finger doesn't all of a sudden just click on the one spot that you have all the time. I sort of found myself clicking on, opening my phone, going to click on the button and going, oh, it's not there anymore. Where is it? Sort of, why am I looking at it? Why do I, what's going on? What's the reason for me to look at this thing anymore? So it just made me question what I was doing in the first place, and sort of making me a bit more focused on other things. So I go, well, I don't actually need to look at Facebook at the moment. Like, it doesn't help me. It doesn't do anything for me. All it is just mindlessly scrolling through. So yeah, that was good help.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think those are
Huey,
sort of
something that you said, Huey, that I also do as well, is that I switch off from the news. Like, so here in Australia, I won't watch the Today Show, I won't watch Sunrise in the morning. I really mindfully choose to not watch the news, because I just found it was just so anything positive to come out of it. And I don't need to know about everyone else's problems from all over the world. I just personally believe that I don't think the human brain is meant to, hear about every single problem that's going on from every part of the world. That mass media, that constant mass media, I don't need to know it. So I choose not to listen to it. So it's nice, it's comforting to hear someone else is doing that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think the other thing is maybe even like listen to like news that's objective, or like sort of just fact-based, because some of the opinion-based news that can come out is I think it's very harmful for your mental health, because when you're having facts that are sort of being opinionated on by certain, like you get those TV personalities that have very strong opinions, and it's very brainwashing and very sort of polarizing, and that's what makes people sort of, I guess, go to the extremes in some senses. So trying to just listen to the first 5 minutes of some sort of very fact-based sort of, this is what's happening in the world at the moment. You come to your own conclusions about what you think of it, and leaves it at that. So I think it's a lot better than having those opinion-based chat shows which just go on and on and on.
Yeah, agreed.
I totally agree with that. I generally just read the headlines of the news, and then that's good enough for me. I'm happy with that. Just for my daily info. Now, Hugh, one of the big things is sort of leaning on mates. It's kind of like a reoccurring theme across pretty much every episode that we've had so far. Um, how has that been for you during the pandemic? If you haven't been able to sort of get out and see anyone, what have you done to kind of bridge that gap, I guess?
Yeah, it's definitely a sort of a learning curve trying to work out, the normal way I would sort of catch up with a mate would be probably like watch sport, have a beer type of situation. Um, Obviously that wasn't available to me anymore, so you had to really sort of open yourself up to new ways of being social. So we did a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of like sort of quizzes over Zoom, that sort of stuff. Just I guess being the one that was more available to sort of, or open to messaging someone first. So I would quite often, my little brother, he lives in Australia, in Sydney, and I'd just be like, he's got a brand new dog, and I'd just be like, send us some pictures of Lani, the new dog, and he'd just send us through some videos or some pictures, and I'll just get, that'd be a good boost for me just to have like that sort of contact. So it's just the social side of things. I mean, you probably both know I'm not like the most hugely of social guys anyway. I enjoy my own me time, so I don't need a huge amount of socialization to keep me going, but having those sorts of contacts and just having a couple of messages here and there, or just getting a random message from a mate every now and then saying, I think especially when the news was quite bad in Australia about the UK, I had quite a few good messages from mates just saying, checking in, hey mate, looks pretty bad over there, how you doing? And so that sort of stuff's quite nice to know that you're in the forefront of some other people's minds, and they're all sort of hoping that you're doing well as well, and looking out for each other. So yeah, it was good to have lots of people out there just being able to available, and able to rely on each other, just to be able to go shoot a quick message. It doesn't have to be every day, it doesn't have to be long, deep and meaningful stuff. As I said, it could just be a picture of your dog, or just a random, I saw this score on sport today, what do you think of that try, or that sort of stuff. It's just that sort of stuff keeps you going. So yeah, little messages are great.
Mate, when you first moved out to England, did you said you value your alone time, and you're not the most social of blokes, but you still know how to get around it. When you first moved out to England, what was that like? You trying to make mates out there, and is it difficult to do when you're basically in a brand new country?
Yeah, it's definitely. I made most of my mates through, like in Australia, through playing sport in school. So, when you sort of buddied up with, through sport, it was like 2 trainings a week plus a game on weekends plus socialization up, like so pubs and stuff after the games. When you sort of have that close contact with some people, you just become friends naturally. So like with moving to a different country, you sort of had to find new ways to make friends, to sort of catch up with people. And so luckily enough, I had a few people that I already knew from back in Australia, because London seems to attract quite a few people to work at least for a year or two. So I always had sort of a small group of people that I knew that I could always just give a quick message to, and we could go catch up for a beer or something like that. But I also was quite lucky in that I found my fiance now, but at the time girlfriend, quite quickly when I moved to the UK. Probably within 2 or 3 months we were sort of going out, and so that was quite very lucky for me to be able to have that sort of person that I was able to find so quickly, and she was able to obviously introduce me to a lot of other people. And that's just sort of how a lot of the friends that I've got over here are all just sort of either friends of friends or work colleagues sometimes as well. But yeah, it was a bit daunting putting yourself back out there again after having such a big social group of people that I knew back in Australia, and having to sort of almost start again, and sort of makes you a little bit nervous, a little bit. But it's been all right. It's been good. Got a good group of mates at the moment, so I'm happy with that.
Huey, you mentioned meeting your partner, Chloe. Now, you were last year meant to have your wedding. I was meant to be over there for it. But obviously that got postponed. Do you want to let us know, like, what's that like trying to, you've got to deal with half the people coming from Australia to over there. Like, I mean, what's the plan? What stress, anxiety did that cause you guys having to postpone it? And then what's it sort of looking like for you guys moving forward? Is there something on the horizon?
Yeah, so it was quite when the pandemic first kicked off back in March last year. Like we sort of at the time we had a September wedding planned, and we'd booked in a venue, bands, all sorts of suppliers and people coming in. So having the prospect of having to cancel that, which we did, and then reorganize it again was quite a difficult decision to make at the time. But we sort of decided that, well, when it got close to the date, September, the date we planned, September was not going to go ahead. So let's go for May. And then we went for May, and then lockdown wave 2 happened here. So that sort of got cancelled as well, and now sort of had to reorganize again for July. So we're just, and I think we've had to come to terms, well, especially me, come to terms with the fact that Aussies aren't going to be able to come over. I'm not going to have my friends or family be able to make it to the wedding, which is a difficult pill to swallow. But it's sort of, I guess there's really not much we can do about it, because there's the travel's going to be heavily restricted and quarantined, and I know people going in and out of Australia is difficult in itself. So I think we're going to have some plans to try and combat that. But mentally, I think you take it in small little bites, and you sort of little one at a time. So you take it, oh yeah, okay, we're going to have to reorganize this, and then sort of take that step, and then okay, yeah, no, friends and family aren't going to come, and sort of use your best way you can sort of handle that, and sort of just try and move on, talk to them, make sure that they're happy with sort of the plans that you're coming forward with. And obviously but mentally it was tough, but it's sort of one of those things in life. I think sometimes you just got to roll with the punches a little bit and hope you come out the other side not too badly beaten up.
Yeah, right. There's nothing else you can do about it, is there? You just, there's nothing you can do.
That's it. I mean, it's just trying to cope as best as you can with what you got. So that's what we were doing. But not gonna lie, it was difficult. But it's just just having to, as I said, those coping things that we've done before that were really helpful in trying to sort of pull through it all and make sure that we were all okay in the end of it. Yeah.
Hugh, I just want to ask, if you were to give yourself advice for 10 years ago, say 10, 15 years ago, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think I wrote some things down actually, which I thought were sort of quite helpful. But it's kind of one of those questions where, if you're giving yourself advice for 10 years ago, would you be the person that you are at the moment, type of thing? It's like, did you learn from the mistakes or from the things that you went through at the time? But I don't think I would particularly listen to a lot of the advice that I'd give myself. If at 18 years old, I wouldn't have listened to my 30-year-old self. So especially some of the advice that I'd give. But if I was, and I was open to it, what would I say? So I guess I was quite, especially at 18, I had like quite a bit of social anxiety. So I was always afraid of what other people would think of me, and so I'd sort of either keep myself to myself and let other people do the talking, and but I was very happy to be around social environments. I just wouldn't like to be the focus of attention. So I'd sort of tell myself just to be less stressed about what other people thought of me, and just be myself, and people would like me for being me. So that sort of thing would definitely be a sort of a big thing that I'll try and sort of make sure that I understood, because it's one of those, I guess, so one of those things that you learn with age, I guess, is that you are who you are. If you go about trying to change who you are, then you're gonna get yourself into all sorts of strife. So sort of just relaxing and owning who you are and making sure that you know who you are and being that person, then you're going to be a lot happier, a lot more fulfilled. So yeah, that's one of the big things I tell myself. What else? I think there's a lot of sort of like, I guess, things that people would say that would be uncool, like that, you play video games or you do that, and that's like, that's super uncool. So just pay less attention to sort of, I guess, people that want to put you down. So like there's a lot of I don't know, maybe you didn't know something about like a sporting team, someone would say, oh well, you're an idiot, you're not a fan of that team. So just pay less attention to those sorts of stupid things that I guess were for some reason at 18 years old, I thought that was very important to know, a whole bunch of shit about sporting teams or about various topics that I thought were important at the time, but they're not really. So just taking myself a little bit less seriously, I guess, would be a nice thing to tell myself at 18.
Huey, I love that you're still doing that computer YouTube game watching. I guess backstory, we lived together for 2 years at uni, Huey and I, and every morning religiously you'd be 1-2 hours, you reckon, punching out, just watching gaming on YouTube. Yeah,
mate, it's the best thing ever. I think I used to hide it a fair. I tried to hide it for a bit, and with Kel being you just barge into my room and, what are you watching now, Huey? And it was like, oh God, I can't. And if I alt tab away from it, then you're gonna think I'm watching something naughty, and so I'd rather you see them watching games. But yeah, I think it's a great. I like it. It's the same as watching sports and stuff like that. You're just appreciating someone else's skill that's in a different sort of context, but it's it's just I was watching a lot of StarCraft at the time. I watched a lot of just weird just games that are popular at the moment, and so it's just nice to watch. You should get into it, Kel. You'd love it,
mate. That's the best thing about this podcast. We're all finding out we all get our own weird little ways in life, and that's yours. And that's fine, and we embrace it, and I love it.
Well, that's what I loved about I think some of the other podcasts you guys did were just embracing the weirdos. I think was the theme that came somewhere. You just have people that were a little bit off center, including myself, and you just groups of people just latch onto it, love you for who you are, and you just sort of you'd be all around it. So that's where definitely a good mates type of situation when that you embrace the weirdos.
I think that was one of the
final question for you, Huey.
Sorry, I was just going to say, the thing that's one of the nice things about, we're all a part of the Mutual Rugby Club, and I think that I guess embracing the weirdos was a big thing we all did. Anyone that came through the doors and wanted to be a part of the club was welcomed with open arms.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. I mean, watching the weirdos grow as well, so you sort of see them come through the door, especially when I was maybe one of the more senior members in the club, and you sort of see them come through the door and sort of have the chat that goes behind, and that person's it's not so might just be a little bit weird, and you have that, but then people somehow just get around it, and just all of a sudden, like in a year or two's time, that person's just life of the party, going on, doing their thing, and just being an absolute legend. And you're just like, well, we contributed to helping that person grow. So it just gives you a bit of satisfaction yourself, knowing that you sort of helped in whatever way you can.
Huey, I'm going to hit you up with 2 final questions, mate.
Sure.
What has this podcast experience taught you about yourself? And then finally, are you aware that you have a slight British accent now?
Do I? I didn't think I did. Oh dear.
It's very slight.
Is it? Shit. I need to be around some more Aussies. I think it's been around too many Brits the whole weekend that I've managed to slide into some Britishisms, I'm sure. No, I didn't know that I had a slight British accent. I've always been told I had a softer Aussie accent, but definitely not a British accent. That's going to have to work on that. What was the other question? What have I learned from this podcast?
This experience.
This experience. I've learned that I've got a good bunch of mates. I've got a great bunch of mates, especially everywhere. But having to listen to the podcasts that you guys have sort of set up and doing this whole line of length sort of stuff, I think is super, super important. And everyone that's got the opportunity to do it should do it. Everyone that has the opportunity to talk about their mental health should try and talk about it, because I think it's one of the growing pandemics of our age, I guess, at the time. So the more that we can sort of encourage people to openly talk about, their thoughts, their feelings, how they're doing, the less mental health issues might be caused. So less people depressed, or less people like suicidal, less people doing that, all these sorts of things that can be caused by mental health. So yeah, it's definitely one of the bigger things that I've learned is this program is talking about your mental health, being open and honest is a huge positive. What else? I wrote down something else that I thought was quite good about this podcast. But
hit us, mate. We're all ears. We want to hear it.
Oh, the other one, don't prejudge people. That's the other one. Everyone's got their own story to tell. So their mental health story, whether or not it's you see in the media sometimes you got these famous celebrities that have got stacks of money, and they're like, they're absolutely being these gods amongst humans type of people, and you're like, how's that person? And then you sort of see in the news that person suffers with severe depression or has gone through these super alcohol sort of dependent states or drug addictions and that sort of stuff. Like, how these people have got all these resources and fans and whatever going through having these issues, and you sort of think, but I think that happens amongst everyone in that the bloke that walks in off the street, your mates, everyone that you think that's got it all together, they might not have it all together. So not judging a book by its cover in that sense, and being open and listening to people when they come forward and say, what they're feeling. Don't invalidate them. Don't sort of say, oh, that's bullshit, mate. You don't feel like that because, you've got this nice house, or you've got this lovely family, or whatever. They're still able to have these issues, and saying that they can't have those issues is just creates more of an issue in itself. So yeah, it's one of those ones where I think listening to other people in these podcasts come forward and say the feelings and thoughts that they've had definitely makes you think that, it's not all just looking through like a social media sort of bubble. Sometimes when you see someone through social media going like living their best life, and you're like, oh my God, that looks amazing. How's that person so lucky to have all these great experiences and go to all these awesome locations and go to all these awesome parties? And so sometimes you peel it all backwards, and you talk to them face to face, and you realize, oh no, that's just all like a social media sort of presence, but it's not actually what they're really like. So yeah, just sort of everyone will definitely open up a bit more if you talk to them face to face, if they wanted to open up to you, and just not prejudging them.
I love that heaps. That is a cracking answer. Love it.
There's some wise words there, Huey.
Oh mate,
I think that's a really nice place to leave it off, actually. I think thank you very much for coming on this episode, Hugh, and reaching out to both me and Hugh, and me and Kel, and wanting to be a part of this. Like I sort of say at the end of every episode, if you do want to be a part of This Is Your Line and Length, and you're comfortable telling your story, reach out to me or Kel. We're happy to have a chat. We'd love to have you on. But look forward to the next episode of This Is Your Line and Length, guys. That's it from us. Thanks very much, Hugh.
Nice, Huey.
Thanks very much for having me.
Good man.
Cheers,
love
guys.
it.
This episode of This Is Your Line and Length was brought to you by Picker Financial Solutions. Picker Financial Solutions can help you with your financial well-being. This includes restructuring your finances, purchasing your first home, or purchasing an investment property. To reach out to Picker Financial Solutions, see the links in this episode's notes. If this podcast has made you realize that you or a friend would benefit from having a chat, please don't hesitate to reach out to experts like Lifeline, Beyond Blue, or a medical professional. In the meantime, take care, look after your lid, and look forward to the next episode of This Is Your Line and Length.